Good morning. My name's Sebastian Olave, and I'm one of the exercise physiologists at the Austin Public Safety Wellness Center. Today we're going to be talking about strategies to mitigate lower back pain. The lower back is one of the most commonly injured body parts amongst first responders. The term back injury is a very broad term that can encompass a variety of conditions. It's similar to saying, my car is broken. We know something is wrong, but this doesn't give us too much to work with in terms of how to assess pain and movement. In this video, we are going to review some basic anatomy, perform a movement assessment to determine compensations and limitations, arm you with tools to attack your weaknesses, and provide training strategies to increase your lower back resiliency.
Let's delve into some basic anatomy to help us understand the role of the core. The core is comprised of bones, connective tissue, and muscles that make up the trunk and the hips. If you take nothing else from this course, remember that structure determines function. Let's use the example of a hammer to illustrate. By simply looking at a hammer, we can come to the conclusion that it is designed to strike and to shape. It's heavier on one end with a wide, flat head to maximize contact. The handle is rubber to prevent slippage. It is shaped ergonomically to fit in our hands. If we look at the connective tissue and musculature surrounding the spine, it is structured like a corset of muscle in different layers and orientations, creating 360 degrees of protection and stiffness around the spine. Based on the structure of this muscle corset, we can conclude that the trunk is designed to transfer and resist force generated by the lower body and upper body. To further illustrate this concept, let's use a sailboat as an example. The ship's sail is attached to what is called the mast, which is the tall structure jutting out from the middle of the boat. This tall structure is secured in place by surrounding guy wires in all directions and orientations that help it resist winds, waves, and any other external forces. The core functions in the same way. The spine is the body's mast, and the guy wires are the muscles that anchor down the spine. Just like the mast, the spine is designed to transfer and resist force generated by the lower and upper body. Whether you are rotating the hips to force open a door, keeping a straight back while you load a patient onto an ambulance, or creating stiffness through the trunk while on a foot chase with a suspect, the core functions as a natural weightlifting belt that provides stiffness and stability with the proper training. Now that we've outlined the role of the core, let's talk about how the major joints of the body work together to create movement, otherwise known as the mobility-stability continuum. We'll use the example of plywood to help us visualize this. Plywood's strength comes from its layers being stacked in opposing orientations. The same is true for the human body. Starting with the ankle and moving up the body, each major joint alternates between being designed to move freely to produce force, known as mobility, versus a joint needing to provide stiffness to resist or transfer force, otherwise known as stability. Starting with the ankle, the muscles and connective tissue that surround this joint and allow you to move it up, down, and side to side indicate that this joint is designed for mobility. The ankle and foot act as a spring to propel various movements in all planes of movement. The same cannot be said about the knee, seeing as how it generally allows the leg to bend back and forth, but limits side-to-side motion. Think of lunges, squats, and climbing and descending stairs. The knee is designed for stability. Moving up the body, the ball and socket structure of the hip tells us that this joint is built for mobility. Think of the connection point between a camera and a tripod. This ball and socket structure allows the camera to point up, down, and side to side. In the hip, this structure allows us to shuffle side to side, backpedal, climb on and off the truck, lift objects, run, jump, and much more. Looking at the lumbar spine, or lower back, the wide vertebral bodies lend themselves to compression, such as supporting the torso, an SCBA, a medical bag, or duty belt. The structure of the lumbar spine also serves to transfer and resist forces generated from the powerful hips below and the thoracic spine and shoulders above. Although similar at first glance, the smaller vertebral body size and different orientation of the thoracic vertebra make the thoracic spine better suited for mobility, specifically rotation, flexion, and extension. You might be asking yourself, Why are we spending time talking about the ankle, knee, hip, and thoracic spine when this is supposed to be a lower back intervention? The truth is, while each of these structures have their own unique role, they have to work together to create movement. For example, what happens when an individual has tight hips due to inactivity? The surrounding joints have to pick up the slack, which is outside the scope of practice for the lower back and knees. This is the same on an EMS truck, a fire crew, or a police team. If a crew member is not performing their role, the job must get done regardless. At this point, the rest of the team is forced to perform not only their duties, but that of their teammate. This impacts the team's performance and effectiveness. The body works the same way. It will find a way to get the job done, but how long before a structure fails, resulting in injury? Unfortunately, workers' comp data tells us that lower back injuries continue to be a leading factor to first responders being off the truck. This is an injury that not only affects work, but also quality of life, play, and mental health. This can be combated by creating body awareness, restoring mobility, and building total body strength. Due to a lifestyle of sitting and a general decrease in activity as one ages, the structures above and below the lower back designed for mobility tend to stiffen. This causes the lower back to pick up the slack and work overtime to do multiple jobs. By restoring mobility in these structures, one can decrease the risk for injury.
Much like first responders, the body is excellent at finding ways to get the job done regardless of the circumstances. This is great for the citizens that are safer due to first responder efforts, but it's a different story for the human body. Repeated movement compensations increase the risk for injury. The first step in identifying compensations is through assessing movement. In the previous section, we learned that everything is connected, which is why we need to look at how the whole body moves together to see the big picture. The barefoot squat can tell us a lot regarding ankle and hip mobility. Stiff ankles will not allow the knee to track forward during a squat, which results in excessive forward trunk lean in a squat. Stiff hips will limit range of motion, control, and strength of the legs. The squat is a movement crucial to everyday activities as well as occupational physical readiness. The test procedures are as follows. Individual will start standing with shoes off, feet positioned between hip and shoulder width, and feet pointing forward. Individual will perform 5 bodyweight squats with a tempo of 5 seconds down and 1 second up. On 5th rep, individual will hold the bottom position for 5 seconds. Coach is going to demonstrate. To assess ankle mobility, we are looking for the entire foot remaining on the ground while the knee tracks forward. With ankle restrictions, you may see shift in the foot, forward, backward, or off balance, but we want to try and keep even pressure in the toes, middle of the foot, and the heel. We're also looking for minimal left to right foot rotation. With individuals with tight hips, as they squat down, you'll see the toes start to point outwards, which is usually indicative of a lack of internal rotation of the hip. We are also looking for a hip and torso angle larger than 45 degrees. In other words, individuals should keep an upright chest. Tight hips or ankles, you'll have individuals where chest is more pointing towards the ground versus as upright as possible. Good. All right. When assessing hip mobility, we look at a few things. The first thing is going to be any shift left to right in the hips. So if we see this, especially at the bottom, you might see somebody favoring a side. This is indicative of any asymmetry between the left and the right hip. Done correctly, it should be nice and even all the way down, and at the bottom should be balanced between the left and the right. Next, we are looking at pelvis rotation, especially at the bottom of the squat. Just like the left and right hip shift, this is indicative of certain asymmetries in the hip. So done correctly, we can see pelvis is neutral all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. Whereas if you have any rotation through the pelvis at the bottom, you will see the hips shift down anteriorly or posteriorly. Regarding depth, we generally like to see the hips be able to sit below the knees while demonstrating good torso posture. When addressing lower back resiliency, it is important to look below and above the lower back. Now that we've addressed the hips and ankles, let's look directly above the lumbar spine to the thoracic spine. We'll be performing a basic overhead reach to test thoracic spine mobility. Individual will stand with their feet under their hips and feet pointing straight ahead. Individual will stand tall, head neutral, arms at their side. With thumbs pointing forward and maintaining straight arms, the individual will raise their arms as high as they can for 5 repetitions. Done correctly, you will see the head, shoulders, hips, everything stacked in one straight line. Done for repetitions. You will see individuals lacking range of motion will not be able to bring their arms all the way straight. We also see elbows being bent. And with those with limited thoracic spine mobility, you'll see the ribs start to flare and pop out about 5 inches above their belly button. The last step in the process is to reassess your mobility to note any changes. For the barefoot squat, note any changes in the knee's ability to track forward while keeping full foot pressure, your squat depth, any change in the ability to keep your trunk upright, a decrease in pain, and general ease of getting into the squat. For the overhead reach, note any changes in your ability to remain stacked. That means shoulders on top of the hips. Look for improvements in shoulder range of motion, a decrease in pain, or ease of achieving desired position. In both the squat and overhead reach, it's important to take note of any pain, stiff areas, and ease of getting into the positions. Now that we've assessed mobility, the next step is incorporating interventions to build mobility and body awareness. Each intervention will follow a similar structure. The first step is roll. We can consider this the poor man's massage. This is to help maximize the effectiveness of stretching and movement. Next will be stretch, which is going to help build passive range of motion in tissues. The last step is move, which is going to help build active range of motion in tissues as well as strength. As mentioned previously, our first intervention is going to be roll. Think of this as a poor man's massage. So you could either use a foam roller, lacrosse ball, there's lots of different implements you could use. Some of the basic concepts you'll want to remember, number 1 is don't forget to breathe. We tend to stiffen up or tighten up when the roller lacrosse ball digs in somewhere particularly sensitive. Deep breathing into the belly is going to help you relax and let that tool do work. Second piece you'll want to remember is make sure you are rolling out soft tissue versus hard tissue. We can't impact any change on hard tissue, but we can on stuff like muscle and fascia. Last piece is go slow. If we go fast, we can't find those areas that need that little bit of extra time and love. Lastly, time. We generally recommend day to day, anywhere minimum of 30 seconds on any particular area, but as always, most importantly is finding a routine that you can be consistent with. If all you have time for is 30 seconds, great, take the 30 seconds. If you have more time, do more. But we'd rather you do a little bit every day versus a huge effort weekly. We're going to start by rolling out the arch of the foot. So take a lacrosse ball or a similar implement and place it under the arch of your foot. Like we mentioned, we are trying to roll soft tissue, and we're trying to go slow. Moving up the body, we're going to roll the calves and the ankles. Position yourself like so on the foam roller. If you need a little extra pressure, you can push your hands into the ground, lifting your body up, and you are rolling from bottom of the ankle to the crease right there behind your knee. Don't forget the lateral and medial aspects of the calves and the ankle, so be sure to rotate your leg to hit those areas as well. An often overlooked area is the shins. This is great for people with tight ankles or runners. So position yourself on a roller as so, and like we mentioned, we do not want to roll hard tissue, so turn your legs so you are rolling the muscle right outside the bone. Just a reminder, don't forget to breathe. Next is going to be the hamstrings. So we'll position ourselves as such on the foam roller, and we are rolling from the crease of the knee right to the bottom portion of the glute. Just like the calf and ankle, don't forget roll medial and lateral as well. Position yourself as such on the foam roller. We are now going to roll out the glutes. Note how Coach Matt is leaning to his right to open up that right glute. He's now going to roll that glute from the very bottom all the way to where his lower back starts. Said it a few times now, we'll continue to say it, don't forget to breathe. If we tense up, the roller cannot do work. Next, we're going to roll our lateral quad. We're going to roll from right above the knee to right where the glute inserts. On these next few, don't forget to breathe. These tend to be sensitive for most folks. Position yourself as such on the roller. We're now going to roll our quads. So we are rolling from our hip flexors to right above the knee. Another method is finding a particularly tough area and just hanging out on it, breathing and relaxing, letting the roller do work. Next, position yourself as so on the foam roller. Note how Coach Matt's leg is turned out. We are aiming to hit the medial quad / groin. This is another great spot to find an area that's particularly troubling. Hang out and just breathe. Don't forget, you want to work below and above the lower back. That's going to help make sure your lower back is not compensating for either area. When it comes to rolling the lower back and thoracic spine, we're not looking to roll the spine. This would be hard tissue here. But on either side, we have our erectors that go deep into the back all the way up. So using a wall and a lacrosse ball, we're going to roll this whole area out to try and open up that thoracic spine and improve our overhead mobility. Placing the ball on a wall, you'll just move up and down. Finding those particularly painful areas, you can stop. And we want to make sure we do both sides. After roll, our next intervention is stretching, which builds passive range of motion. Just like we did in rolling, the big focus is going to be on the breath, using those deep belly breaths to send signals to our muscles to relax, extend, get longer, etc., etc. As far as the amount of time you're spending there, we want to spend as much time as we need to impact some change. For some people, this may be as little as 30 seconds. For people that are a little bit more advanced, opening up a deep squat, for example, and just holding there for up to 5 minutes may be appropriate. Once we finish rolling, the next step is going to be stretching. Much like stretching, we want to focus on breathing first. Relax. Deep breaths send signals to our body to relax and allow the muscle belly to actually stretch and do work. First stretch is going to be for the calves and the ankles. So you will squat with an implement in one hand and you will favor one side. So if he's going to favor his left side, trying to keep full foot contact, he's going to use the weight of the implement to help stretch out the ankle and the calf. Spend as much time as you need to impact change in that particular area. Moving on to the hips, the first stretch is going to be hip 90-90. So make sure you position yourself as such. First step is getting as tall as we can and making sure our torso is nice and tall. To work on external rotation, we're going to hinge forward until we feel a stretch in that front leg. From here, it's essentially choosing your own adventure. You can shift left, you can shift right, you can rotate, as long as you're feeling a stretch in that front leg, particularly the glute. Spend as much time as you need here to impact change. Coming back to neutral. Next, we're going to help improve internal rotation of the hip. You should feel this in the back leg. So we're going to lean back like we're in a recliner, and we're going to turn towards the direction of the back leg. Depending on your mobility, you may feel this in different areas. Some might feel it in the glute of the back leg. Some may feel it in the groin of the back leg. But as long as it's in the back leg, it's doing work there. As mentioned before, don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to get both sides. Next, we're going to stretch the hip flexors and the quad. These muscles tend to get particularly tight because as a whole, we tend to sit more than we need to. As an effect, the hip flexors and the quads get tight, pulling everything forward, resulting in back pain. So assume this position here. If you need something under your knee, perfectly fine. As in all of these, execution is crucial. What I mean by that is if your ribs are flaring, if you're throwing the hips forward, let's show them that, coach. This is not what we're looking for here. All you're doing is extending your back and stretching out your abs, which is not what we're looking to do. So if we go back to step one, the first step is pulling the ribs down and squeezing your butt cheeks. Most of you will feel it on that back leg already in the quads and the hip flexors. From here, maintaining that position, you shift your hips forward to deepen that stretch. Note that despite him going deeper and deeper, his back stays neutral, he squeezes his glutes, and the rib cage is maintained pulled down. So using a wall, we'll put our hands on a wall and get in a position where your hands can be straight. First thing we do is brace for a gut punch. So we pull the rib cage down, we squeeze the glutes, and now we hinge our hips back, maintaining a neutral back. And now we are trying to drive our head down in between our biceps. Don't forget to breathe and hold this position as long as you need to impact change. Note especially how the lumbar stays neutral, but the thoracic spine is extending. This is what we want. What we don't want is for the lumbar to fall into hyperextension and stretch the lumbar instead of the thoracic spine. After rolling and stretching, our next intervention is going to be move. So now that we've built passive range of motion through stretching, we now want to create control in that newly gained range of motion. It does us no good to have range of motion that we can't tap into in daily life and on the job. Just like on the other two, remember the focus is to keep breathing. Breathe into the belly to relax and make these new positions that may not be so comfortable at the beginning more and more comfortable with time and effort. Our first movement is going to target the ankles and the calves, and it's going to be a simple toe and heel raise. So using the muscles in the front of the leg, try to pull the toes in the front half of the foot up, activating those muscles, and then you're going to smoothly transfer onto the toes. The key to this one is slow and controlled. We want to try and really feel the muscles engaging and holding for each rep. Next, we'll move on to a quadruped squat with a focus on internal rotation. So position yourself as such and make sure that your feet are wider than your knees. This is going to place a focus on internal rotation, which we tend to lose as we age and prohibits squat depth. So once we're here, it's just like a squat turned 90 degrees. So we're going to lower our butt down to our heels, and then we'll squat back up. Focus on only going so low as to keep a neutral spine, and make sure we keep the toes loaded so that we also get the added benefit of an ankle and calf stretch. As we mentioned before, we've got to work below the target area and above. We're going to target the T-spine with the quadruped T-spine rotation. So we'll put our hand on our head and we're looking to rotate up, looking up into the sky. So your eyes will follow that elbow and then we'll come back to our original position. Note how rotation is only happening in the thoracic spine. I should be able to rest a bowl of Cheerios on Coach's back right now without worrying about it falling. Many people perform this stretch incorrectly by trying to get, quote unquote, a larger range of motion and end up rotating through their lumbar, just like this. And we're not able to really target the thoracic spine. This is crucial because due to lifestyle, we tend to lose mobility and strength through that thoracic spine. As an example, just think about how you're sitting right now. Exactly. Dr. Stuart McGill is one of the top subject matter experts in back health and rehab. His assessment strategy, research, and training methodology for building lower back resiliency have restored pain-free function in various populations, ranging from top-level athletes to weekend warriors. His research has determined the most effective exercises to build baseline core strength using the concept of 360 degrees of stability. They are known as the McGill Big Three. These holds are meant to build muscular endurance by engaging the muscle corset that surrounds the spine. Dr. McGill recommends 3 sets of each movement in a reverse pyramid rep scheme. For example, a 3-2-1 rep scheme is a great way to implement these movements in your routine. This means performing 3 reps per side on set 1, 2 reps per side on set 2, and 1 rep per side on set 3. Each rep is held for 10 seconds. Dr. Stuart McGill recommends performing these a minimum of 3 times per week, but preferably daily. We have found that these movements are effective as part of a warm-up, in between conditioning intervals, in between sets of lifting, or whenever you have time. The most important piece is long-term consistency. The traditional methods of core training, such as sit-ups, crunches, side bends, and Russian twists use the musculature of the core to produce force and movement. This repeated bending and extension, especially under load, is not training the core optimally for the demands of the job and life, and it may lead to injury. You can use a set of pliers as a hammer, but how long will they last before they are bent out of shape and unusable? Remember, structure determines function. The first movement in the McGill Big Three is known as the curl up. For the starting position, lie down on your back with one leg straight and the other bent so your foot is flat on the ground. Place your hands under your lower back to help support it and squeeze your glutes. To start the position, you're going to brace for a punch to the gut by pulling your rib cage towards your hips. Your entire upper body should move as a single unit and only so much to raise your head a half inch off the ground. You're trying to avoid spinal flexion or doing a crunch or sit-up. A good cue is if the hairs on the back of your head are still touching the ground and you feel your midsection light up, you're probably doing a good job. Return to the starting position in a controlled manner. Perform for 3 sets of 10 seconds in a 3-2-1 reverse pyramid. The next movement in the McGill Big Three is the side plank. To get into the starting position, lay on one side with your bottom forearm and bottom knee or foot supporting your body weight. There are a few variations to account for ability. The baseline variation consists of knees bent at a 90-degree angle to the upper body as shown. The next variation is legs straight with the top foot in front of the back foot for added balance. The final variation is legs straight with the top foot stacked on top of the bottom foot. From here, you will keep your shoulders, hips, feet stacked and in line, and you're going to elevate your hips by bracing for a side gut punch and squeezing your glutes. Avoid axial rotation and lateral bend. Return to starting position in a controlled manner. Perform for 3 sets of 10 seconds in a 3-2-1 reverse pyramid. The last of the 3 McGill Big Three is the bird dog. To get in the start position, get on all fours, ensuring that your hands are right under your shoulders and your knees directly under your hips. There are a few variations to account for ability. The baseline variation consists of a simple straight arm extension. We'll first brace for a gut punch, make a tight fist, and elevate the arm to shoulder height. Note how there is no movement through the spine as he extends. This will hold true for all of these variations. Let's start that one again. So we're just going to we'll go from the next variation consists of a simple leg extension. Okay. The next variation consists of a simple leg extension. Brace for a gut punch. Kick your heel straight back, squeezing this glute, pointing your toes towards your head. Note how regardless if he's moving his upper body or lower body, the spine does not move. The final variation consists of bracing for a gut punch and extending your opposite arm and opposite leg simultaneously while avoiding spinal flexion, extension, and lateral bend. The final variation consists of bracing for a gut punch and extending your opposite arm and opposite leg simultaneously while avoiding spinal flexion and spinal extension and lateral bend. Return to the starting position in a controlled manner. Perform for 3 sets of 10 seconds in a 3-2-1 reverse pyramid. Next, we're going to introduce some training strategies that you should keep in mind in the weight room or when doing conditioning. So the first thing we want to coach up is going to be the stacked position. So if we look at Coach Matt right now, head, shoulders, hips, ankles, all stacked in a line. Once we start introducing movement, such as overhead movements like we're going to see here shortly, we start to see the ribs start to flare. We start to see lack of shoulder mobility, and we lose this stacked position. So the idea is through all life's movements, including on and off the job, so whether you're on the back of an ambulance reaching for something overhead, or if you're at the house just reaching for that top shelf, getting some plates down, we want to try to think about, am I stacked or am I arched? So if we look at a simple overhead press, for example, we can see what it should look like. So before we move, we make sure the rib cage is down, glutes are squeezed, and as we press overhead, our goal is to maintain that stacked position. As we can see at the top, the barbell, the shoulders, the hips, ankles, everything is stacked nicely. Keep this in mind on the job and off the job. Losing that stacked position will look something like this. As we can see, the ribs are flared, and this does not look like a comfortable position. The lower back is compensating for lack of mobility through the thoracic spine and through the shoulders. One of the most common lower back injuries we see comes with rotation and twisting through the spine. A good way to correct this is to build body awareness and know what the hips and the shoulders are doing. I like to think about this as the shoulders are that annoying little sibling that wants to do everything big brother or big sister does. Big brother and big sister is going to be the hips. So we always remember that the shoulders follow the hips. It may look a little bit like this. We can move left, right, side to side, up and down, but we see that wherever the hips go, the shoulders follow. Versus done incorrectly, the hips go in one direction and the shoulders don't move. Think about this next time you're restocking equipment on your apparatus, where we see this happen quite a bit. A great movement to help train this range of motion is going to be any rotational work with a med ball. Our cue for this movement is squash the bug. All the power and all the force comes through the back leg, so we need to turn that foot or squash the bug towards the wall we are rotating through as such. This allows the shoulders to move with the hips, allowing powerful and safe movement. So remember, the shoulders follow the hips. Keep this in mind next time you're moving a patient, moving around the back of the ambulance, you're forcing open a door, or something as simple as picking up dishes and putting them up in an overhead cabinet. I know all first responders love a challenge. So we're going to show you a simple core circuit that emphasizes the role of transferring and resisting forces. We're going to use the same three concepts that we used in the McGill Big Three: flexion, extension, lateral bend, and rotation, and try and challenge those in some different movements. The first movement is going to be a kettlebell march. You'll stand in place, lifting one leg up at a time, looking for all the movement to be the hip and below, and keeping the torso nice and tall. The key is you move the weight, it doesn't move you. These can be done at a quick tempo, slow and controlled, and with a variety of weights to challenge you. Once again, this movement is challenging anti-flexion and anti-extension of the trunk. Case carry.
By the side there? By the side. The suitcase is by the side?
Yeah. I was thinking you could like start down there, like where your shoes are.
Okay.
And then you can just kind of pan while I talk. I'll tell you when. Or I guess when I start talking, you can start walking.
Okay, cool.
The next movement is going to be a suitcase carry, which is focused on resisting lateral flexion. So start by picking an implement, standing tall and neutral, and you will simply walk with the implement. You can walk quickly or slowly, or pick a weight that is challenging for you and make sure you hit both sides. Remember, the key is you move the weight, it doesn't move you. We should have a nice long neutral spine throughout the entire movement. The next movement is going to be the pal-off press, which is designed to resist rotation. So anchor a band at about chest level. You're going to walk with it until there is pressure on the band. You'll stay in a nice athletic position. Once you're here, you're going to press it out and hold and resist the temptation to rotate. So using your trunk, using your hips, you are locking it down in place. We can add variation to this where you're pressing it in and out. We can also move it up and down while maintaining that rib cage tucked down. We could also step with it, all while keeping the fists in the center of the chest. Something as simple as making a narrower base, so bringing your feet a little bit closer together, makes it much tougher to hold this position. We hope you learned something about how to improve lower back resiliency. Don't forget to check out our other videos built to empower you to achieve lifelong wellness. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. We are here to help the helpers.